Welcome to Straight Lines. I'm Tim Neiman. This is where life lessons meet leadership, where business gets a dugout seat, and where baseball gives us more than box scores. It gives us blueprints. Whether you're managing a team, building a brand, or just trying to lead yourself better, you're in the right place. Because here on Straight Lines, we believe the shortest distance between purpose and progress is truth and clarity. Excited today to have with me a special guest, great friend. Um, Very proud of this young man. He's now the Miami Marlins pitching coordinator for all things pitching in the Miami organization, from the big leagues all the way to rookie ball. And we welcome Bill Hezel. Bill, can't thank you enough for being with me today. I'm excited to talk to you and see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here. I'm, super appreciative of the opportunity as always.
So we'll get into a lot of good stuff here, and uh, I had a chance to be with you for a short period of time, but it was really cool. It was really rewarding for me, and even I learned quite a bit. But what originally drew you to pitching development? When did you realize, hey, this is something I really wanted to do? I think I may know the answer, but from your end, what drove you?
I mean, I think it was a combination of, I don't know, my own shortcomings as a player. That was certainly part of it. And then I really just am like very competitive. And, when you stop playing, that void doesn't get filled very easily. For some people it does. Their job or their line of work or something else can feed that, but I didn't really have that. And so coaching gave me that back. And I think those two things combined, just my own failures as a player and trying to understand why certain pitchers succeeded and why others didn't. And then just, trying to find something to fill that competitive void, I guess.
Always impressed how intense you were and your drive for success, and just making the players better, pitchers better, especially. You were much more than that, obviously, with me, but um, your dedication to becoming the pitching coach and yearning for all those extra information and why things work, why things don't work, what's good for one and maybe not good for another, and vice versa, trying to find all those things. I've always been very impressed with. Was there a turning point or somebody in your life as a mentor that kind of pushed you a little here and kind of molded your coaching philosophy?
Yeah. I mean, man, there's a lot. I think, I probably got something really impactful and important from, everyone I had the opportunity to work with. I think my dad was really the first one that kind of instilled in me, not even directly, but just that there's opportunities to give back to the game, and giving back to the game is important. And one of the ways in which you can do that is helping other people. And I think that was the initial impetus to maybe think about coaching. I think about you know Adrian at Northampton Junior College just giving me my first opportunity, and showing me what like an actual structured program looks like, and holding players accountable. I think something that I took from you, a lot of things, but I think you were the first person to really get me to understand that like you're coaching the person, not necessarily the player, and that there's a great deal of importance in understanding that. Um, and then I think getting the drive line and being around some of the great people there, and Kyle, and all the people that have come through there, you really get an understanding of how important it is to just be like really honest with the players, and to give them clarity, and to tell them the truth, and to understand that those truthful conversations can be pretty hard sometimes. They're pretty much hard all the time. But so many coaches, I think, run away from those conversations or have a hard time having them. And at Driveline, you just really embrace those conversations and being able to tell players the truth. So,
Yeah, you mentioned coaching that individual and not specifically the baseball player, obviously. That's what we've all done. But do you find that the same or similar, or are there differences, with professional pitchers from, I would imagine a rookie kids and some of those folks in low A would probably be very receptive. Is it the same way up the ladder? Is it in a triple A and big leagues that are guys that, are willing to listen to that perhaps harsh criticism and hopefully learn from it?
Yeah, I think it varies as you climb up the system, but you I think initially before I got into professional baseball and maybe even before I got the drive line, I understood the importance, like I said, of coaching the person and trying to help them become better people as well as better players, and just understanding the things that the players are going through off the field. And I don't know, I think it's easy to think that maybe some of that goes away in the professional ranks because it's their job, they're making money and all of these things, but it just doesn't, at every level. I mean, you're talking about players at some of the lowest level at our DSL academy that, you've been to the Dominican numerous times. And I the opportunity to go there, with you. And, I've been back several times obviously since. And so you're talking about players that are dealing with all kinds of stuff off the field, enormous pressure to perform on the field, and then that pressure and some of those things and just the life responsibilities that happens all the way up. And so understanding how those things impact them on the field, impact their motivation, can maybe be blockers, can maybe be supplemental to the work that they do on the field, is just really important. So I think from the outside looking in, you think some of those things go away because these players are getting paid and some of them are making a lot of money, but it doesn't. It's the same. It's just their problems, if you will, or their responsibilities is probably a better way to think of it, are just different.
Yeah, I think people, as fans, the average fan look at it and think, oh, well, it's almost like they're looking at a bunch of robots and it's a video game or, some kind of a board game you're plugging. Well, they're real people with real feelings and, real issues and responsibilities. It's a great way to put it. And you're right. They're going to be different in a lot of ways. They're the same. And even more so, they're different and probably more complex, like
Yeah.
any other responsible adult's going to have, all kinds of these responsibilities. Now, my livelihood's trying to, become the best baseball player I can be, so that's interesting. I think people lose sight of all that. After the end of the day, they're all human beings, right? They're just guys with issues that are playing baseball and love it. Um,
Yeah.
was there one moment that clicked as like, all right, this is it, man. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And maybe it was to drive line, perhaps, or where you arrived. But I think the credibility and see what you think became when you got involved with the Angels. I think that might have been it. I don't know. What do you think?
Um, I mean, I think there was a couple. So I think the moment I realized that this is something I want to pursue, my first year at Northampton, my first year coaching ever, the season ended my first year and we performed well and guys pitched fine. But as I look back at the end of the year, I was just like, hey, I kept all these guys healthy. That's great. None of them actually like were better though. And so I started to really think like, it seems like I did a good job, but I don't think I actually did. Like I didn't make anybody better. And so that started me on a path to like, okay, all I basically did with those players was just, hey, here's the same drills and the same things that I was taught as a player, and I'm just gonna throw those onto you. Uh, and it really made me think about I should be I should be really trying to push my own limits and think outside the box a little bit more and try to find more ways to make guys better. And I think it was that second or third year there where I actually had a group of players that completely committed and bought into whatever it is I wanted to implement. And they all got significantly better. And I think that was the first time that I was like, oh, I can actually help players. And I think that was the first realization that like, I can actually have a positive impact on players. And from there, I was kind of hooked. And then I think the other big one was just like, the way I got the job at Driveline, honestly, I didn't apply. It was just a cold email from the COO at the time, or the CEO at the time, to just say like, hey, look, we've seen some of the things that you've been doing and posting, and we think there's a position here that you'd be a really great fit for. And that's was the first opportunity where I could make this an actual job. At the time, I was cooking up all these different ways to get out of my full-time job to make baseball my full-time job. And this was really one of the first opportunities to do that. It didn't come with, a pretty large amount of sacrifice. I had to move across the country and quit my job, sell my house, convince my wife to. There was a lot to do with it. But I think those two moments were the things that kept me committed, because there was a time where I was like, okay, I really want to make this a full-time thing, but I don't know if that opportunity will ever come to the level that I want. And things like that were the things that kind of kept me doing it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, and the results speak for themselves. And certainly, I'm not surprised how hard you've worked at it, and just a student of the game and making players better. Has that evolved now since college? Your philosophy, like you know, from what you did in college and through Driveline, and now morphed into you know m- overseeing an entire organization's pitching department. Has that? What has happened with you there?
I don't think my my core the way that I operate has changed. I think, even early on, I really committed to telling players the truth, and just like, telling a player, I think it's okay to tell a player that the current version of himself is not good enough to reach or play at the level that he wants. And I think I reflect on my own career, and it wasn't anybody's fault. I'm not saying that any of the coaches that I had, in portions of my career did anything wrong, but I think there's a lot of, oh, well, you're going to get there, or everything's going to be fine. And the reality was, looking back where I was as a player, like, no one ever told me like, hey, look, this is fine right now, but you have to do A, B, and C if you want to play professionally. Like, no one ever truly had that conversation. Again, look, maybe I wasn't destined for that, or I wouldn't have worked hard enough, or whatever, but at no point did anyone sit me down and just go, hey, look, you want to be drafted and play professionally, you throw 89 miles an hour. 89 miles an hour is not going to get that done. So you need to do A, B, and C. And I think I've always operated there. And so I think I've continued that. And I'm blessed in that the Marlins are fully aligned with like that type of transparency and clarity. And so that helps a lot. And so I think the main thing that has changed is just access to more information, right? Like, as I've gotten the opportunity to work at Driveline, a place that has a lab and has been, cooking on baseball data for years and years and years, I've just now gotten access to more information and a bigger library of info to leverage. But my own core philosophy of just like telling players the truth, giving them as much clarity as I can, and being transparent has kind of stayed the same.
It's funny. You said, hey, I throw 89. It's not good enough. Back 30 years ago with the old ray gun, which was probably 93, it was so heavy I had to carry it to the game in a wheelbarrow. But it's funny how times have changed. Well, a lot of it too is where the ball's picked up out of a hand or at the home plate. I think that has changed quite a bit over the years as well. But I think that clarity with players, I think, is really important. I mean, there's so much delusion out there from parents and coaches in high school, and they just blow their kids up. And hey, Mike, you've got to come and see this kid. College baseball was thrown 86 to 88. No, it was 81,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they don't understand. So lead me to a little question here is, between what would you say now for a young pitcher? I want to ask you what you'd look for in a young guy too, but is that guy better off, or what kind of a schedule would he have? I'm better off in this world of travel baseball, playing all the time, where they play so much, and maybe not getting better, other than maybe some game experience, or maybe an and/or actually working with some driveline people or somebody that you would recommend, or what's that balance, or I mean, what's the recommendation if I'm a parent listening and I've got a 15, 16-year old, What should he do?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think it's a tough question to answer because you have to make peace with just like the reality of recruiting and all of those things now, right? And so the reality of recruiting, if you're a player that is, high school age and you're looking to get recruited, you kind of have to play on and do some of these things. It's inevitable. It's just kind of the way things have moved. And so I don't think that that's necessarily great, but it is the reality, right? Like, I think you see it all the time. There's a lot of people on Twitter and all these spaces that'll complain about, hey, all, guys just chase velo. And it's like, yeah, but that's what gets recruited. And so you can't blame the player for wanting to have the traits that they feel like are going to give them these opportunities. So I think it's a little bit like that. You have to make peace with that. But what I would say, which you kind of alluded to, is once you get to a certain age, and you run out of getting beneficial experience from playing games, right? There is some level of that, right? To be put in situations to know where you need to go with the ball when the ball is hit, to understand those things. I don't know what age that is, but at some point you've kind of that's run out. And I don't know, maybe it's, after Little League or something like that, or maybe it's a little past that, but at some point you don't get better playing games. You just don't. You get better at training. You get better at getting bigger and stronger. You get better at baseball by becoming more powerful. You get better at baseball by, you know, training how to throw a new pitch or how to command your fastball better or how to command your arsenal better or swing the bat faster or make contact at a higher rate. And it's really hard to train or add those skills in games. I think games are better at testing if those skills have transferred and if and giving you a measuring stick. But I think, given the current landscape, guys would do much better by training. And even back as early as when I was on your staff, there were plenty of players where we would meet in the off season. They'd be like, "Hey, I want to go play in this college summer league," and I'd be like, "Look, you're wondering why you're not getting a ton of innings for us. You're not getting a ton of innings for us because you don't throw a ton of strikes and you throw 81. What you should do is train to throw more strikes and not throw 81. If you go and play a bunch of games, all you're going to do in these games is not throw strikes and throw 81. And then you're going to come back here in the fall and not be better." So I think it's thinking of it like that. How much better are you going to get playing games versus actually training? And that's the conversation I think more players and parents should be having.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Bill. I totally agree. I think it's just so many people with so many opinions, and it's what makes baseball great. In one aspect, because you don't have those opinions in football and basketball. Everybody thinks they, get in a dugout and run a club or help your pitching staff or whatever. I agree with you. I think there's a certain level where they don't know how to play the game. I don't think there's very
Yep.
many good students of the game. But I agree, once that happens, and you what you've got, the hand you're dealt is the hand you're dealt, and then all you're doing yeah, is accelerating or emphasizing that you're not good enough. And I think honest conversations and clarity is pretty key. Visiting here with Bill Hezel, the great Bill Hezel. I'm not opposed to saying he really is the Miami Marlins pitching coordinator for their entire organization, all the way up to the big leagues. Since 1909, Baseball Blue Book has been the trusted directory for MLB scouts, and today it's grown into the most comprehensive platform in the game. But it's not just for players and coaches, it's for businesses too. Inside the Baseball Blue Book app, companies can create full profiles, promote their products or services, and even build a private groups to connect directly with players, parents, and coaches. Whether you're offering training equipment, nutrition, or any service that touches the game, you now have a direct pipeline to the baseball community. If your business wants to stand out, it's time to get in the book. Download Baseball Blue Book today from Apple or Google Play. We were back in where with Bill and Bill Hezel, and just a impressive gentleman. There's no question about it, and carving out quite his career. So we talk a little driveline, and honestly, Bill, the first time I ever witnessed it or really had any idea was watching you coach. And I was always impressed. And you touched on the beginning, the health of the arms, the health of the kids, the health of the bodies. They didn't break down, that's for sure. They were really, really good. I thought, wow, that in of itself alone is worth those sessions. So it's getting better and better and better. And we did see velocity gains and all that stuff. So how do you balance now with all the analytics and the biomechanics and then with the traditional, perhaps challenge to develop a pitcher? How's it all blended together?
Yeah, so I think I don't know. I try to think of it as like the data doesn't coach the player. The data informs and and your feel helps you execute whatever that coaching intervention is. And so you certainly still have to be able to build relationships with the players. I think um, sometimes it can seem like that's kind of going away. The idea of like building really solid relationships with the players and the level of importance that that has. And I think it's like the opposite. I think at the end of the day, you know, you might be asking a player to do something that they don't want to do, they don't necessarily buy into right away, and you're not going to convince them unless you have both, right? A very solid relationship of trust built with them already, and data information, whatever it is, to support that this is the right path. So I think you certainly need to blend all three, and I think the best way I found to be able to do that is your level of technical knowledge, and this is just what's worked for me, is the level of technical knowledge needs to be really high because you need to be able to explain it to these players in a way that they can understand. And their level of familiarity and how comfortable they're going to be with this type of data is going to be all over the place. Some of them are going to love it, embrace it, be looking at this stuff all the time, and that's an easy conversation. Some of them are going to be very old school, maybe not all that interested, not all that analytically leaning. And so you have to be able to explain it to them like they're five. And so that requires, at least for me, a high level of technical competency with some of these things. And for me, that's the way I connect with them. I think I do a good job building relationships, but I think my in with most of the players is that I can demonstrate to them that the technical knowledge is really high. And so that instills trust that I can help them. And again, though, I think it still comes down to like the data informs and your level of feel and the relationship you have with the player is what actually helps you execute that.
I think the players under your wing and under your tutelage in the Miami organization is really lucky to have you. Really lucky. And I think any organization, and if again you go back into the kids, the players don't know. As soon as they know you care, they'll kind
Yeah.
of they'll give you that trust and listen to you and try to be better. So how do you maintain a consistency then, and knowing that the rookie ball guy might be 20 years old all the way up to the big leagues? How do you maintain all that same message across the board, across the organization?
Yeah. Honestly, I think, um, that's Miami's superpower is that we have pretty complete alignment up and down the entire org. And I think that was kind of the genesis for structuring this director role and like the director structure that Miami has, having it oversee the big leagues all the way down. Um, there's trade-offs with that. Obviously, it's a lot to oversee, and it's a large undertaking. But I think the benefits far outweigh it, and the big benefit is just like alignment, top to bottom. And what that means, at least for us, and why I think it's so effective, is the things we do in the big leagues in terms of like what we care about, how we train, the metrics that we prioritize, and that we tell players are important. Those are exactly the same in the big leagues as they are in the DSL. Like the way our players train in the big leagues is exactly the same as our players in rookie ball. The reports that they get, the metrics that they get, the things that we prioritize, our pillars, it's exactly the same from the absolute top to bottom. And so I think one, that creates a ton of cohesiveness, but two, I think it's been really beneficial for our players because as they climb levels, the language is the same, the training's the same, philosophically everything's the same. I mean, that's also a credit to our coaches for buying into that structure, but I think that's really what our superpower is that we're really aligned from top to bottom, and it's really hard to do. And I think many organizations try to do it or they aspire to do it, and it's hard. It's hard to pull off.
Yeah, very difficult. And you think you're doing, I think the proof's in the pudding. I've read a bunch of stuff and seen some things online, and I read some of your posts once in a while or whatever, and articles. And I mean, you seem to be really producing these guys because of that consistency. And I think had a lot of success, right? I mean, this past year, your pitchers top to bottom were making some pretty impressive improvements, overall. Is that true? Right?
Yeah, yeah, we threw it really well in the minors this year. We made some simplification to our targeting stuff, our execution strategy. We really prioritize stuff and developing better stuff. And I think the results were pretty pretty good. We bumped up to like top 5 in K rate. We improved our K minus rate. Any metric that you would look at to kind of measure performance. I think we improved pretty well. Our AAA group won the AAA national championship. That was awesome to see. We had a bunch of guys on that team that like climbed 2 or 3 levels on the pitching side, which is in a single season is like pretty unbelievable. And so, yeah, I think it's been good, but it's how the game goes. We have to like duplicate that now. I think that first year it can. I don't want to say it's easy, but we've got to back it up. I think the most impressive piece is the fact that we threw a lot of things at the players. So we drastically changed how we train. We implemented a lot of things that no other team, no other org is really doing. We call pitches from the dugout, all these different things. So we threw a lot at the players, and for them to respond the way that they did with all of that, our coaches as well is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's very impressive. And I think at minimum, you're going to create a lot of buy-in,
Yeah.
for the guys that already are there and future Marlins down the road, whether it be a draft, free agency, or trade or whatever else. I think anybody comes in, they're going to usually do the homework, or the agent will. And they'll look at that. It's like, you know what? I want to pitch.
Yeah.
I mean, and across the board, like the Marlins have a lot of good players. I mean, a lot of good players. And I think the buy-in is critical, and that breeds more buy-in, breeds more success. Breeds success, and I think that's exactly what you're creating there. Talking to Bill Hezel with the Miami Marlins, building quite the legacy of his own. When the game is over, what will people remember about you? My book, What is Your Legacy? Challenges leaders, athletes, and everyday people to think beyond the scoreboard. It's about purpose, impact, and the mark you leave on others. If you're ready to define your legacy and live it with intention, this book will guide the way. Get your copy of What is Your Legacy today and start shaping the story only you can tell. It's available on Amazon, and new website out, CoachTimNeiman.com. Please give it a look. Back with Bill here. You've talked about you kind of touched on already how unique your approach is based on other clubs. Is there anything else you want to say on that, or is there anybody else in the big league organization that does things similar to you? Anybody copying? And that's kind of the
Uh,
best form of empathy, right? I mean, oh, look at what this guy's doing.
uh, I think we'll see.
Yeah,
I think we'll see this year. I think I don't know that you look at we talk about this internally all the time. I mean, you look at just the landscape of the sport, the division that we're in, and the Nationals are making some pretty significant changes. I mean, I think the division's gearing up to be pretty ruthless, and so I think and I know, I think, I'm not speaking out of turn by saying we felt like we were a little behind. And so we've got some catching up to do on some things. And so I think, internally our pillars, or the things we care about, are trying to like constantly innovate and think about, all these traditions and all these like common ways of doing things in the game. And is there any that, we could improve upon? We're always trying to think, 3, 5 years into the future, what could we be doing right now that, other teams are going to be thinking about doing 3 or 5 years from now? We should be setting in motion those things right now. Is there anything, if there's something we think that is going to improve on-field performance, then we have to do it. I think, like, when you think about, calling pitches from the dugout, which is obviously something that, we're doing that, no other org right now is really doing to that extent. It's been pretty public. It's been talked about a lot. I think, quite simply, we just thought, do we think that this will improve our pitcher's performance? And internally, as we discussed, maybe implementing this, even before last year, the only thing that mattered to me and our leadership group was, do we think this will improve on-field performance? If the answer is yes, you have to do it. Nothing else matters. You have to do it. And anything that is blocking it should be removed because you believe and are committed that it will improve performance. And I think that's just kind of the lens we look through everything. Is there something that we can do or implement with the way that we train, or our strategy or our philosophy, that will improve performance? And if so, we have to explore doing that. And yeah, I think, we got some other things we're going to try to implement this year. And there's some, stuff that we've done with our training that I think has helped a ton. And we're going to continue doing that stuff.
How was how was it? How was the buy-in, or how was the response? From the calling the pitches, and it's obviously you're a great pitch caller. I always thought that was my strong suit over the years, and that's the way I look at it. It's a little different in college, obviously, because it's a full-time job. I remember Skip Berkman saying, hey, they're out there throwing pitches and taking food off my table. Not necessarily the same scenario with me, but I can see that. But from a logistical standpoint, why bother having all the spray charts and all the other information you have on every hitter, video, and, what they hit, what pitch they hit, what the counts were, what they like, all that stuff. Why have it if you can't implement it in a game? Which
Yeah.
is what I would buy in. I would say, yeah, why not? But obviously the game is full of egos from little league all the way up. So how, did you get any pushback, I guess? And one, but I think too, let me just say this too. I think too, I think conversations between whoever's calling pitches with the catcher and the pitcher during the course of the game make a huge difference as well. I remember when I was pitching coach with Quakertown, I had Kirk Bullinger, who got to the big leagues with Boston, and I called pitches most of the time. And he and the catcher, was a catcher from Westchester, we got together and talked every inning. What's good? What's bad? What's good for you when you're behind in the count, which I still think is winning pitching. You see more and more of that. How can you? And I also see too, doing broadcasting and double A, triple. I always said, man, there's a bunch of guys that can get you to 2 strikes. They get to 2 strikes. Then what? How are we going to get you out? So what's that pitch today? So it's a long-winded question, but I think it makes sense to you. Why have all that stuff if I can't really implement it during a ball game?
Yeah. I think, so we didn't think about doing this because we thought our catchers were actually like bad at calling the game. It actually really had nothing to do with that. It was more along the lines of partially what you said, which is just, look, like, when you think about calling the game, a lot of it comes down to just like knowing who the pitcher is, what his strengths are, what he can do. Like, if you simplify it and think about who knows the pitcher better than almost anybody outside of themselves, it's probably our pitching coaches that have poured hours and hours of time looking into how to make this player better, helping this player. And so I think it was less about like we don't think our catchers are capable. It was more about like, would our coaches do a better job because all the information is right there in front of them? And does removing that, I don't want to say it's a burden, but removing that job from the catchers to some degree allow them to focus more on these other things that are really important to their game, getting strikes, blocking pitches, throwing guys, all of these other things that they have to worry about. If we could, declutter some of this for them, maybe there's some benefit there. And our guys can still shake. And so those conversations you talked about are still really, really important. And I think actually, I mean, we saw this on the big league side for sure when we implemented it at the end of the year. This is actually like put a greater focus on those conversations and has actually made those conversations like way louder, the magnitude, like those conversations are always happening. But once we moved to this, I think there was a greater level of importance that the catcher and the pitcher put on these conversations. And it actually made that relationship and those communications even better. And I'll say, I think from a buy-in perspective, there's definitely pushback, right? There's always going to be pushback from a ton of different parties, right? Catchers, everybody. I think what helped was we rolled this out in the minor leagues right at the beginning of the year. And we use that as somewhat of a way to, work out the kinks, see if we could pull it off, what the response would be, what tweaks we would need to make. And so we rolled this out over the entire minor leagues. We didn't introduce it in the big leagues until the last 9 games of the season. And so what it allowed us to do is, one, when we presented it to the big league group, we had almost a year's worth of minor league, results and data and said like, hey, look, all of these things that you're concerned about, our minor league players were concerned about them as well. And this is how we work through all of that stuff. And then it really honestly came down to our manager, Clayton, who's incredible. He felt really strongly about doing this, but he felt really strongly that we would have, tons of minor league data to actually like pitch the players on. And, he was the one that ultimately decided, like, I think the timing is right to do this now. This is how we should implement it. I want to be the one to introduce it. I want to be the one to present it to the players. I feel strongly that this is the right decision. And, no better way to get buy-in than to have, the leader of your big league staff to be the one to bring this to the table. And, that's exactly what Clayton did. And again, there was definitely pushback and there was some skepticism for a ton of different reasons. But I think the results in those final 9 games, although it's a small sample, were great. And yeah, we're not turning back.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the outcome was for those 9 games, if I recall. I think, obviously, I watch. I think the Marlins did pretty well this down
Yeah.
the stretch. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the 2 years prior, right, were you in the playoffs? The Marlins were in the playoffs. That wasn't that
Yeah.
long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 years ago. So again, playing really good baseball and once again and doing it. I think it's really good. I think it's great. I think all that communication on top of, what's going on. And it turns out to be a wonderful learning experience for guys that, are trying to get better and actually, you know, are really care about getting better. I think it's wonderful. I think it's outstanding.
Yeah. I'll
Is
say
every
I'll say
workplace
one I'll
good,
say
Bill?
I'll
Yep.
say I'll say one other thing that I think like
Yep.
might possibly help out some younger players or be applicable there. One of the other big reasons I think it was really beneficial from a pitching development perspective is, we had guys in the lower minors who, throw an okay amount of strikes and throw really, really hard, right? And, you could be a top 10, top 100 prospect, and you could just, if you wanted to in rookie ball, throw 75% fastball and just bully the entire league, right?
Yeah.
Now, some orgs may think that that's like a positive. I personally think that like that's probably not a usage strategy that's actually going to work for you in the upper levels of the minor leagues. And so while that might get you out of rookie ball, I don't necessarily know that that does the best job developing you into the version of the player that is going to be successful in double A, triple A in the big leagues. And I think you could see some of that even as little as like the high school level. Like, look, like you and I know there's, if you throw in, name a conference, you have, any conference that's local to where you're at and where I've spent most of my time. If you're upper 80s, I mean, you could probably punch out 15 a game by just being 90% fastball, right?
Yeah,
And at the same time, you're not going to be able. You go and play at Lehigh, name a Division One school that's around that area, or even a bigger school, Vandy, an SEC school. You're probably not going to be able to do that. And maybe it's better from a development perspective to use your stuff as if you were to, already be pitching at the highest level. And I think that's kind of the bet that we're making as well. And when you can call the game for them, it helps them understand that a little bit more, and you can push them towards that a little bit more. Obviously, like, look, there are times at the lower levels we got to abandon that, and we're just doing everything we can to help the guy get in the strike zone that day. That happens too. That happens
so,
too, right?
uh,
But I do think that's
that's
worth
true.
mentioning because I think you see that a lot, even at, like, the high school and the college level.
Yeah, 100%. Visiting again with Bill Hezel of the Miami Marlins, and for him to implement all these kinds of things organizationally, top to bottom, you can't have any team killers in every workplace and every team. There are unseen forces that can derail success. In my book, Team Killers, I uncover the behaviors, attitudes, and habits that destroy chemistry and show you how to build a winning culture instead. If you're a leader, coach, or teammate who wants lasting success, this book is your playbook. Get your copy of Team Killers today and protect your team from the inside out. Available at CoachTimNeiman.com and, of course, Amazon. Tell you, time flies when where you and I were always dangerous to begin with, but time flies when we go through. Heading into the kind of last segment here. Um, is there any story from the Marlins or Angels that fans would never have heard of, but you really kind of hang your hat on a little bit, very proud of?
Uh, Man,
That's pretty general, broad based.
pretty pretty general. I think. I mean, it's fairly public. I mean, it's a tough story. It's a tough story for me to tell because it feels like, you know bragging, I guess, or whatever. But I think, I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to work with Shohei Ohtani for, a handful of
Yeah.
years, and one, just like how unbelievable of a person and a player he is. That was awesome. But two, you know, working with a player like that with those kind of abilities, and him playing on both, I just like learned so much from working with him. um One, just like, you really see what separates, I think, really great players and good players is like, Shohei was one of those players in a training perspective that I've never seen somebody be able to, like, joke around and have so much fun in training, like in between reps, throws, swings, and really have a great time and generally enjoy training. But then the second it's time to swing or make a throw or make a lift, it's just laser focus. And I
Hmm.
think when you're talking about a sport like baseball, where the training is so, especially as a pitcher too, right? Yeah, the training is so repetitive and is just like, it can feel like the same thing every single day, and it's easy to lose discipline or lose focus. And I think the great players are able to, like, really enjoy training and find ways to enjoy it, but still be like laser focused on every single rep. And it was just like unbelievable to be around him as much as I had the opportunity to and work with him. And he was one of the first players that I got to work with at a high level that really, like, made you, if you gave him a recommendation, and the great players all do this because they take a lot of pride in their career, um, was one of the first players that would really, if I brought him something, he had no problem challenging me with, okay, cool, I will absolutely do this, or think about doing this. Why? You need to show me why I should do this. Tell me what this is going to help, how this is going to translate. What am I not doing now that this unlocks for me? And yeah, it's those type of players that, you actually learn more from them than they learn from you. And I think that was certainly the case with Show.
Yeah, that's kind of the next question I was thinking about was, have you learned something from another player that
Oh,
maybe changed you, and
I got a
think
good one for that.
probably
I got a good
good.
one for that. Yeah. So in my first year in Anaheim, I won't say the player, but we had a pitcher who was on our staff and pretty accomplished. Very very good player. Had been playing for. Was already a veteran. Pretty old school in terms of just his general philosophy. And he was just like had a pretty big wall up. If I brought him something, he's a self-made guy. He wasn't like a high draft pick. He wasn't this giant prospect, and so he took a lot of pride in being able to coach himself, fix himself, and so he was someone that had a pretty decent wall up, was fairly old school. So if I said, hey, look, like I looked at the Hawkeye data or the pitch movement data from this last game. Here's what I got. I wanted like we should try this. You should try this. It was pretty frequently shut down. There was a lot of pushback on like anything I would bring to him. But I think what I saw is from my own experience. It's very easy when you're dealing with a player like that for you to shut down and just go, okay, this guy doesn't want me to coach him, so I'm just going to stop coaching him. And in this particular case, like I just didn't do that. I just committed to the fact that like if I think I have something that could help this player, I am bringing it to him. I don't care if he like picks me up and throws me out of the clubhouse. Like it's my job is to bring this player information that I think can help him, and I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm just going to keep doing it, and if he doesn't take it, cool. I'm just going to keep bringing it to him. And so I did that basically for the entire season, with very limited success. And then, I think it's like, I don't know, maybe like a month left in the season. And we're on a flight. I think we're going to New York from Anaheim. And this player's like, hey, he texts me. He's like, hey, come sit next to me. I come sit next to him and he was just like, hey, I've been thinking like, can you like manage my off-season throwing program? Like put it together for me, write everything for me, help me with it. And I was like, yeah, that absolutely, of course. And then we worked together that whole offseason. I share that story because all I thought about after that conversation was like, I earned the opportunity to work with him in the offseason by trying to work with him all year. And if I would have just given up on the player and just been like, screw this kid, he doesn't want anything to do with me, then he doesn't ask me for that help. And it was just a really good lesson that like there are going to be players that put up walls and you just can't stop coaching them. You just like have to continue to coach them and you have to continue to coach them hard. And eventually you might have the opportunity to win them over and that could be really impactful. And it was just a really, really important lesson for me and something that I've never forgotten.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know if I could ever be more impressed with you, but I am. I mean, I'm very impressed, Bill, and from everything you're doing, and more importantly is how you do it, and the communication and the conviction to everything that you believe in is paying off for you. There's no question. So where does this all go? Next 5, 10 years? I mean, you're a pretty good visionary, forward thinking type guy. How do you see pitching development evolve perhaps next 5 years, let's say?
Uh, I mean, I don't know. I think biomech data is going to play a pretty large role. It's obviously heavily leveraged already, but I think widely still misunderstood. I don't think the public has access to everything they need to like be large contributors either. So I still think there's a lot of levers to pull and things to uncover on the biomech side of things. I think there's still opportunities to not prevent injuries because that's not going to happen, but to um, do a better job at mitigating them than we already are. And so I think the biomech side of things is going to continue to be massive in terms of philosophically what I think the future of pitching looks like. I think my belief in man, we're already headed there is just like every pitcher throws over 95 and every pitcher throws 6 or 7 pitches. I think arsenals are just going to continue to expand. Um, I think like hitters are getting better at a pretty rapid rate and pitchers are trying to combat that. And I think the way we're going to see pitchers combat that is by continuing to pursue velo, not throwing their fastball very much, and having a super wide arsenal So they're extremely unpredictable, and they have a variety of different pitch types that they can leverage against both batter handedness. I think
Yeah,
we're already seeing some of that.
we're seeing more and more of, this guy's got 5, 6 pitches, 7 pitches, whatever. And, by the way, they're throwing them for strikes. It's
Yeah,
not like, oh, here's my knuckleball, it doesn't do anything. Here's my splitter that doesn't do
yeah.
anything. They're actually really effective pitches. I had some other things I've thought about. I want to ask you um, some of the rule changes, pitch clock. What do you think?
Yeah.
Like it?
Man, I'm torn because I like it as a fan and as a pace of play, and I definitely think it's probably helped from a viewership perspective, and I think all those things are probably real. But at the same time, I think I'd be hard pressed to be convinced that it's not worse for pitcher health. Um, yeah, but at the same time, I think that's this weird dichotomy that the game has to deal with. Like the the thing that maximizes performance isn't always going to be the most aesthetically or visually appealing to the fan, right? Like I think the thing that would like maximize pitching performance might be unlimited time between pitches so guys can feel like unbelievably 100% fully recovered before they deliver the next pitch. But also at the same time, like fans watching at home don't want to wait 2 minutes between pitches, right? So it's this weird dichotomy. So I'm torn. I generally think pitchers can adapt to it and kind of have. I definitely think it's made the game more exciting. So I think generally it's been a positive. Um,
From
yeah,
a broadcasting standpoint, you know, I, yeah, okay. I don't mind it. Um, from the old school type guy, as you know, I am. This is brutal. What are we doing? I always felt rules were made for bad players or bad coaches or bad organizations, and they create these rules that, why? Well, for who? For what? It's always the minority. But I do think it's okay. How about throwing over three times? Third time we got to pick them, or it's a balk. I think it's
that
changed the running game a lot, by the way. I've seen
yeah.
teams watch the clock. Dan Fiorito, who's now the first base coach for the Yankees, he was in Somerset, played at Manhattanville. And he and I talked, and we just watched the clock run down. They get them over, and watch the clock run down, and they just gamble and had over 100 stolen bases. And, by the end of June, I mean, it's just crazy. I think it changed. But anyway, your thoughts.
Yeah. I generally don't like it just because it's made pitching harder, right? It's made pitching harder. But I do think there is like I don't know, something romantic about the fact that it's brought back some level of, a greater level of importance on some aspect of the game that was kind of getting passed by, right? Like, you know, uh, you just like can't be slow to the plate now. You just like can't not have a good move. You can't not hold runners well. I mean, you never really could do that, but I think in the past, when there was no clock and you had an unlimited number of throws, there was a variety of different ways that you could control the running game, and now you just like that stuff has to matter. Like you can't give up free bags, you can't be slow, you can't have a terrible pick, you can't not be able to pick, and so it's just placed a greater importance on those things, and I think I think that's cool. I think like it's just created more ways to win, more ways to score runs, more things pitchers have to do to prevent runs. Yeah, again, I hate it as a coach, but I think as a fan, it's probably been good for the game.
Yeah, I'm not a fan, but I think all the things you mentioned can be taught anyway.
Yeah, oh
The
yeah,
importance
yeah,
of runners and all that stuff. And then I think there were again very few guys percentage wise you'd watch in a ball game and they just throw over and over and over. I mean, rarely did they go over that many times to begin with. I'm not a fan. Last two, the umpire, is it ABS, right?
yeah.
The challenge system coming to a theater near you, coming in 2026. Thoughts on that?
I love it. I think having spent so much time this year, seeing minor league games in person, watching them, I've had the opportunity to see it, quite a bit at a couple different levels, and I like it. I like it a lot. I think, um, honestly, I think it's done really well for helping hitters and catchers like have a better understanding of the strike zone, from like a pitch recognition perspective. Um, I like it. I think any opportunity to make sure that the call is gotten correct is incorrectly is good. And having seen it goes fairly quick. I don't think it delays
Yeah,
things all that much. It's been pretty quick, and so I'm all for anything that like minimally slows the game down, but like helps get the correct call more often. Um,
yeah, I'm
yeah,
okay with it watching, doing the AAA games, and it does go quick. As long as it stays there and it doesn't morph into every pitch,
yeah,
where I mean it's a robot calling the game. That I would have a hard time with. Last one from this, and then we'll wrap up here. Um, Runner on second, extra innings. What do you think?
man. Uh, I don't like it. I don't like it. I think I understand the concept, uh, speed of the game, more runs, and all of these things, but uh, I don't like it. I think you're probably yeah, you're just putting pitchers in a position that they didn't earn, which always rubs me the wrong way. Uh, always rubs me the wrong way. I hate thinking about the idea that like one of my guys could go out there, start a clean inning. There's a runner on second base, and in theory, they could just get three consecutive outs and lose the game.
That's
Right?
right.
They could just come
Yeah.
in, get backside ground ball, fly
Yeah.
ball, strike out,
Yeah.
and we
You
could
lose.
lose the game. Yeah, we could lose the
Yeah.
game. I hate it.
I
I
think.
understand why, but I hate it.
Yeah, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. Not one little bit. It. So I mean, I sort of get it and all that stuff. So you talk about a radical idea. Here's mine. And I never think I'd ever say this. 162 ball games. So why don't we go make it 11 innings or 12 innings? They'll play the same way, and if it's tied, goes in the standings as a tie. I don't know that that's a horrible idea. I mean, you still want to get the W. I'm not sure how the fans will like it or not, but I think if they do it ahead of time, it's called up playing 12, where we know we have a finite group of pitchers that we need to use that day, and we may need to get through 12, and that's it. And
Yeah,
we've protected the arms, played the game the right way, and okay, it's a tie. I mean,
yeah.
very radical, I think, for
I
me,
think
especially. I
I
don't think
do
it's
think.
terrible.
No, I do think that's maybe the only other thing worth considering with starting the runner there is maybe it doesn't go so deep into extras, and so in this weird way it does preserve pitching, right? Because right, we don't right. My guy got three outs, but we lost. I don't have to run another guy out there, so maybe there's an aspect of that. But I just hate the idea of a guy coming in getting three consecutive outs and we lose the game. It drives me
Yeah.
nuts.
Oh,
Yeah,
might be there's some kind of finite matter to that where if it's 10 innings, 11 innings, whatever. I think fans will be fine. I mean, they do it in hockey. It's probably way too many ties. I don't think you'd have as many in baseball, though. I really don't.
yeah.
And I don't know. You never see it. Last question is I ask everybody that comes on with me. So I've developed this podcast called Straight Lines. And I don't know if you know the whole story, but, I just like today I was at McDonald's. I shouldn't go. You hate me. I know you hate me, but they're going to McDonald's. But they came in and I go to the drive up and hey, would you want to round up? Very nice, good tone. You want to round up, for a Ronald McDonald House? Sure. He asked me nicely. It was nice. Straight line. I get and pick up the food. Very nice young lady. Sir, I hope you have a great day. Those are like little things that get stacked upon each other that are pretty important stuff. And when things get out of hand, they're not, the path to success is certainly not straight. A
Yeah.
lot of bumps and curls. But the more of those things I can keep online, the more success I'll have. What does straight lines maybe mean to you, Bill?
I think we touched on it a little bit in in the during this, which to me it just is like honesty and truth telling. Like the building a relationship with all the parties involved that is honest and truth telling, but still coming from a place of love. I think that's where sometimes we can get lost with the idea of like, I tell our coaches all the time, like, look, your job is to tell them the truth and be very direct about where they stand now and where they need to go and how we can help them get there. And you can do that with empathy and love and from a place of caring. Oftentimes it sounds like that's only coming from a place of you stink or you're not good enough. It doesn't have to come from that place. But I do think it's important to make sure that like each player has like clarity and that you're having honest conversations and you run towards those conversations, not away from them.
I think that's terrific, man. Thanks for joining me on Straight Lines, where leadership lessons meet the game of baseball. Remember, leadership is about drawing straight lines, even when life throws us curveballs. If you enjoyed today's show, share it with a teammate, subscribe, and connect with me on social media for more insights. And if you want to dive deeper, check out my books, Team Killers and What is Your Legacy? Until next time, lead with clarity, play with purpose, and keep your line straight. Bill, can't thank you enough for being with me today. It means a lot to me, and I'm a big Marlins fan right now, and I love the Yankees too. But that's okay. Maybe we get you to the Yankees. I'll become the bench coach, and here we go. But Bill, thank you very much.
Of course, Ken, thank you for having me. And as always, wouldn't be here without you. So thank you for the opportunities.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Bill.